Hello, everyone. I am Margaret Swift Thompson of Embrace Family Recovery and the Embrace Family Recovery podcast. And I am excited to be with you today on this YouTube channel we've launched. And I will be offering nuggets and tips and support through podcasts, video recordings of guests, and also some solos like I'm doing now. And the way I want to do it is I want to talk about specific topics that are often asked of me in coaching work. And so I thought I'd start with anger. I've had many people who love someone with the disease of addiction ask me, how will I ever get past this anger? How will I ever feel less angry and enraged at the person who I love who has the disease of addiction? And I understand that. I understand the emotion, I understand the fear, and I understand the worry that I will not ever be less angry. So let's talk about anger. First of all, we often call it the dirty word in the emotions because so many people will not touch anger, won't do anger, feel anger is bad. And what I like to say about feelings is all feelings have their place. And they're all feelings. And in recovery, we say a feeling is just a feeling and it will pass. But when we're not in recovery, I can speak for myself, I dreaded facing any feelings. I avoided it at all costs because I didn't think I could handle them. I've had an interesting relationship with anger, and from the standpoint of raised around anger, very fearful of it and tried to do anything to stop it. And then in my own anger, struggled with how it impacted the people I loved because I know how it impacted me when I was around it. And I got to a place with anger where I used it almost as energy. For example, feeling sad and despondent and at a loss felt helpless and a place I didn't want to go. Whereas if I was angry, I could accomplish things. I might be able to get myself out of bed or clean a mean house. Not much fun to be around me when I'm cleaning, mind you, because I'm a bear, but I could get a house clean done. And I'm not a domestic goddess, but that was one time I got my house cleaned. What I would say about anger is in this disease, this family disease of addiction, it can be a source of energy. The cost of it is it hurts people we love, especially if we don't find outlets for our anger that don't hurt us or people we love. I believe that it's important to help us in navigating anger at figuring out where our anger goes. So one of the steps that I encourage families to take is really looking at who or what am I angry with? Self, another, the person with the disease of addiction. If we're not putting it at the foot of the disease, we'll probably take it out on people we love, including ourselves. And it doesn't help us to do that. Whereas if we look at the disease of addiction as a separate entity that takes over the person we love and infiltrates our home and hurts all of us, we can find ways to release the anger at that rather than letting the disease off scot-free, rather than beating up and shaming the people we love, including ourselves. We can look at the disease of addiction. I haven't met a challenge more dramatic and confusing than navigating the disease of addiction. It is a complex illness. It is chronic, progressive, and potentially fatal. And it is something that requires of us to heal from it a lot of counterintuitive activities, whether, again, I have the disease or I love someone with the disease. So if I have the disease, it is screaming in my ear with my own voice, you must use or escape using this substance or behavior in order to survive. And it gets to be so desperate as it progresses that we're not just surviving, we're merely getting to normal or even just below normal while we're using and feel horrible in our skin and yet can't stop. And then we beat ourselves up and our rage at ourselves is through the roof. And the disease gets off scot-free. Flip it to the family side. When I am enraged with the person I love who has this disease, and I am so angry because they can't stop this train wreck. They won't, quote, choose to do different. And if it was a choice, I assure you, people with the disease of addiction would choose different. And we also say things like, if only you would have, or shouldn't you have, or why don't you, or can't you? Just stop, just don't do. The reality is those angry responses or reactions feed the disease and let it get away with what it's doing. And they shame and hurt the person with the illness. So a very important tactic or tool to heal from the disease of addiction would be to start separating the person from the disease or ourself from the disease. And I can tell you, I've taught a lot of people this concept, and many of them have said, what? And as they've started practicing it, have found some relief and some ability to accept and some ability to let go of the control they never had. And I encourage you to consider when the disease has gotten away with it and we've beat up the person or ourselves and how that's worked out. Whenever you're given a suggestion to look at a new tactic or try something different with this baffling disease, it helps me anyway to look back at the many ways I've tried to do it in the past that haven't worked for me. So what have I got to lose? Am I willing? Am I willing to try something different? Do I have that ability? Anger also needs an outlet. And some people, it needs to be a physical outlet. Some people, it can be through journaling. Often people will write a letter. I often give this exercise out for people too. Write an uncensored letter to the disease of addiction, describing what it has done to hurt the person who has it and also hurt you as someone who loves them. And take that letter and write and write and write, and don't reread, don't censor, don't correct, just dump. Because that way you're getting it out, but you're not hurting yourself or anyone else. And you can express those things. And that's not a letter I would encourage you to give to your loved one who has the disease, but it isn't a letter that I would encourage you to share with your sponsor if you're in a fellowship or a community of recovery, or your coach or your therapist, to see if that can be helpful to you to actually read it out loud to somebody as well as write it. We hear things differently from written word to listened word to thought in our head versus spoken out loud. And that's why it is so beneficial to have people in our lives for recovery. I'm going to share another tip that I taught my family, my kids. Anger is often the cover for another emotion for many of us, whether it's sadness, remorse, hurt. And there's something very satisfying about breaking ice. So my kids learned if they needed to let go of some feelings, and usually it was anger at first, and then there was other things underneath, they'd come to me and they'd say, can we have some ice? And we'd go get ice out of the freezer and we'd take it outside and we'd throw it against the wall, throw it against the driveway. And it was a physical manifestation of release of energy, but it also was very satisfying because when the ice breaks, it sounds like china or glass breaking. It doesn't hurt anyone, doesn't hurt property, doesn't hurt you, and it doesn't hurt anyone else. The neighbors might wonder what you're doing, but I just taught my neighbors what we did. And I can say that that has been incredibly satisfying as an outlet. I did go to the breakthrough program. At the time, it was the codependency program at Karen Foundation many, many years ago, in the throes of my relationship ending with my person who was identified as someone with a compulsion or addiction. And they had me take a bataki bat and hit mats as a way to release my hurt and anger. I couldn't do it. So what I do want to say to anyone who does find a tool that works for them, utilize it. Try what works for you. Try something new if you're comfortable doing it. But if you have a very strong resistance to doing it, don't. Try something different that you're willing to do. I couldn't do that. I don't even know if I could do it today, probably, but I was in a very different place then, and I couldn't even begin to release those feelings. I think part of it was that I feared if I ever got truly honest about my hurt underneath my anger, I wouldn't function. I wouldn't be able to move on or cope. And I know for me, when it comes to sadness, I've been so worried when I've started to feel sadness that I won't stop crying. And then I can't function or I can't cope. I'm here to tell you that I've never met anyone who eventually didn't stop crying. But I do understand the fear that the emotions are so real, so intense, so big that I won't cope. And I won't be able to cope if I let them out. So for the day's tip for this message, I would say take what works and let the rest go, which is very much a philosophy of recovery. And I'm going to offer things that I give out as tips and tools to my clients and have used in my own journey and have learned in the rooms and around recovery rooms and therapeutic meetings. And I hope you'll consider trying something different and something new, one day at a time. But most importantly, if you're ever struggling to the point that you don't think you can survive, cope, or you're having thoughts of hurting yourself, don't hesitate to call 988 and get help. Don't hesitate to reach out and ask for help. Because I know there were times in my journey where I absolutely could not do it alone. There's many times I could not do it alone. And whether it was a therapist or whether it was a sponsor, whether it was a fellowship, whether it was a friend, whether it was going through a treatment process, I've been gifted a life beyond my dreams thanks to those resources and recovery. And I wish that for you. Until next time, take care of you.
Please find resources on my website, embracefamilyrecovery.com. This is Margaret Swift Thompson. Until next time, please take care of you.